I have to say, I'm tired of reading all of these articles that are so enthusiastic about working from other countries. They're titled things like 3 amazing beach locations where you can live and work with new digital nomad visas, but then at the end, there's like one throwaway sentence about, oh, and be sure to talk to your HR department. There are a lot of practical considerations in terms of how you can legally continue to work in another country that your company is going to care about, and before you go to them, you should be prepared to talk about as well. Hey guys, it's Annie here from Start Abroad, and today I want to talk to you about how you can keep your job while moving and working from another country. This is when you come to the point when you want to talk to your boss, when you want to talk to your HR department or your company about potentially moving and continuing to work for the same company from another country. How do you go about doing that? What advice would I give as an HR professional who's been working in international HR for a long time? This video is for all those people who want to take advantage of these remote work policies and really work from anywhere. A little bit about my experience in this area. My background's in international HR. I have set employees up to work in 20 countries all around the world. And then also personally, I have some experience as a digital nomad. I actually spent 4 months traveling around in a camper van and working from that van last year. And then I have also been a remote contractor working from Rwanda for a company in the United States. So this is near and dear to my heart on multiple sides of this negotiation. The truth is, if your employer is a US, Canadian company, then they should probably have real concerns about you relocating to another country to work. And this is for a number of reasons that I'm about to get into. But what you should do then as an employee in order to be ready for that is just educate yourself a little bit about what are those concerns, how can you maybe alleviate those concerns, or what are some things that your company or HR department can do to make it less risky for them for you to work abroad. This is especially valuable if your company is smaller, maybe doesn't employ anyone else internationally, is only in one country. They might just not have very much familiarity with how to go about doing this because it's quite specific, a bit technical. So we're going to be talking about that right now. Why are employers reluctant to let their employees work from other countries? The first category, and this is really like the big category, but it encompasses a number of things, is employment law. The rules and regulations that govern your employment are based on where you are physically resident, not where your company is located. And the tricky thing about this is that your company, however, is responsible technically for making sure that your employment is governed by those laws, so they have to technically learn them and uphold them. These are things like maternity leave, overtime pay, working hours. A lot of countries have like specific bonus structures that are required by the country itself. This is different country to country, and you can see how this would be a hassle, right, for your HR department to learn about and then try to uphold for just one employee. The next thing is also part of employment law, but it's important enough that I wanted to discuss it separately, and that's payroll mandates. So these are the withholdings that your company makes out of your paycheck, things like Social Security, Medicare in the US. So each country has its own system for this, and your employer is responsible for the correct withholdings from your paycheck, also contributing on their side, and then paying that to the country's government where you are located or where you are resident. This is also like complicated, right? Your company has to learn a whole new bureaucratic system of how to do this, which they aren't going to want to do. And the third thing, this is the most important thing by far. This is what your employer at least should care about. It's something called the risk of permanent establishment. If your employer has a full-time employee central to the business working in another country for long enough that they become a resident, technically speaking, they should incorporate some kind of entity in that country or a branch of some kind in order to stay legally compliant with labor laws in that country. And the problem with that really is, well, one, it can be quite a process to create a new entity or branch in another country. But the real problem is that once they do that, they're then typically required to pay corporate tax. This can get quite expensive, especially if your employer is a US company. Actually, they're probably used to paying a pretty low rate of corporate tax. It's likely going to be higher in a country where you're working, and they don't want to have to pay tax to two countries. And then the last thing you should know is that each country has its own systems in terms of the withholdings that we already talked about and some tax that may be put onto payroll. So it's possible that the cost of employing you in another country is going to be a little bit higher than employing you in your home country. To give you a sense, in the US, it can vary. Like the full cost for employing someone is usually 1.25 to like 1.4 of the salary that you get as an employee. A couple smaller things, time zones. Thailand just came out with a great new digital nomad visa, but if you're in Thailand, you're going to be like 11 hours ahead of the East Coast, like 14 hours ahead, depending on like the time zone of where your company is located. That is pretty hard to coordinate. So I'm just gonna broadly lump together two things here, but they're both related to safety and security. So the first is your company might worry about their duty of care toward you. So it's possible that the country that you're moving to is less safe or secure than where you are used to working, and your company might feel a responsibility to ensure your safety to some extent. And then the second thing is cybersecurity. A lot of countries, it can just be riskier in terms of protecting confidential information, protecting your company's online files, for example. So this is something your company might want to be aware of. There are quite a few reasons that you now know about why your employer might be a little bit hesitant to let you go and work from another country. So what are your options? What can you do? How can you negotiate to make this more compelling for them? So you could choose to pitch one or more of these solutions to your employer or boss or HR department. The first one, if you want to be a true digital nomad, this means you are on the move. You are moving from country to country on a regular basis, not spending any more than 6 months, should really be less than 6 months per country. True digital nomadism, you really don't have to worry. Basically, if you're not spending that much time in each country, then you aren't filling the requirements to become a resident of that country. And it's really when you technically become a resident that all of these considerations about labor law kick in. So if you're going to be moving from place to place a bunch, you don't really have to worry about this. Your company also shouldn't really have to worry about this. And it is country specific, but most countries, you wouldn't become a resident until you've spent 6 months or more in that country physically in a year. The second option, your company could always establish an entity or a branch in the country where you're working. Maybe this is kind of part of the plan, the long-term business strategic plan anyway. You happen to be going to this country, so it makes sense to go ahead and start this a little bit early. We're not gonna spend a lot of time on this because I think it's probably not the case for most of you guys. Another potential option is if your company happens to have a partner, a really trusted partner in that other country where you want to move to, you could ask that partner organization or company to employ you technically. So this would be like a second or like a shadow payroll system for you. There is another way to work for your same company in another country that people often are thinking about. And I want to talk about what are the risks, how could you do this responsibly? So that is to become a contractor. The thing about becoming a contractor is to be a legitimate contractor, you have to probably change the responsibilities that you currently have in your current role as a full-time employee. And that is because there is a risk that your company runs of misclassification of you if you were a full-time employee and then you became a contractor, but you changed nothing about your responsibilities. It's going to look like they're just trying to avoid paying taxes to the government on you, potentially, right? That's the risk. In order to become a legitimate contractor or allay the fears that your company might have, there are a couple things you can do. You can change your responsibilities so they're less central to the company's core mission. A good example of this is I've been a contractor as a recruiter. So hiring people for the company, not considered very central to that company's core mission, to give you an idea. The other option is that you could cut your hours back and maybe just do a part-time. And remember, regardless, contractors typically do not get benefits like health insurance, 401k contributions, etc. My number one recommended option is to work with a company called an employer of record. So these are companies that have entities in the countries that you want to move to, and they provide the service to any companies with employees abroad, where they take care of all of these labor law details we've been talking about. All the withholdings, all of the making sure that you're compliant with the general employment laws of that country. They're going to handle it all for you. It's a pretty simple and straightforward solution for your company. The catch, of course, is that it comes at a cost. So even with the more straightforward employer of record companies, you would expect a monthly cost of probably something around $600 per month per employee. Although this can vary depending on what country you're going to, and maybe if your employer has a number of employees working in that country, they could get a deal per employee. It does make it easier though for you to know that up front. So you might be able to negotiate with your employer, say if it's going to be $600 per month for them to work with an employer of record, then you can say, oh, well, what if we just cut my salary by $600 per month, something like that. Obviously, up to you if you want to negotiate that, but it could be an effective technique. The other thing I would say about employers of record, well, first of all, there are a number of different options out there. There are what call themselves employers of record. There are also companies that call themselves international PEOs, but they often also offer employer of record services. So it's worth checking out companies in both of those categories. But for most digital nomads, people who are moving and want to settle into a new country and they're like the only employee doing so, and that's what the goal is, I would recommend a simpler and more straightforward option. So there are some employer of record companies that are, a little bit more straightforward. They don't have so many hidden fees. They do just a couple of things and they do them well. I would particularly recommend checking out a company called Remote, and then also a company called Deal. And I'll put the details for both of those in the description. And the final option that you can consider is to just move and start working from another country. I'm not going to recommend this because once you become a legal resident of another country, which remember is usually after 6 months, this is not technically legally compliant. However, what you want to think about here is the difference between the law and the enforcement of the law. So there are some countries that are really not interested in enforcing these types of laws. They might just have a priority of actually attracting more digital nomads, those types of people to boost their economy. There are other countries where it might matter more. So this is kind of on you to do your research on your specific country and figure out where they stand on this. But for a lot of countries, there's actually very minimal risk because the government just isn't interested in enforcement. Okay guys, well, I hope that this has been helpful and that you have stepped away from this video with a little bit more knowledge about what is your company going to care about if you are wanting to work abroad, and also what are some of the solutions you can provide to them to make it legally compliant or just ease their fears when it comes to you working abroad. If you have any questions, if you want more assistance navigating this complicated space, if you want some coaching on how to have these conversations with your employer, please feel free to reach out to Start Abroad. This is what we do. We help Americans and Canadians move, including digital nomads, to Costa Rica, Panama, and Portugal. So if any of those countries are on your list, please get in touch and we'd be happy to help you out.